moving into part 3 now of our unconventional career panel discussion with Adam, Matt and Katerina. What we're going to move now into is the big question, the big talking point. Where are the markets up to now? Where's labour markets up to now? Where's hiring markets up to now? What impact has COVID had? And what does hiring and I guess the landscape for businesses look like now into the future? So I'll start off with you, Adam, for the question on everyone's lips. Impact of COVID. How did you see that? How did you react to that? How did you see that, I guess, impacting your market?
Sure, yeah. So Hatch is a online jobs marketplace, two-sided marketplace to connect young people to jobs that could be a really great fit for them, where young people could be, a student at university or someone recently into the workforce. COVID had a huge and immediate impact on the employment market. But I think the short-term and long-term impacts actually look quite different. So short-term, a lot of people were displaced, particularly in industries that just weren't operating anymore, like airlines or hotels or sports, arts, restaurants. And a lot of those people were young people, working in retailers, working in hotels, and were out of work. And COVID also had a very immediate impact on hiring in the graduate space. A lot of grad programs were slashed by half or more or altogether in many cases. So, if you're young in 2020, it was a challenging year for you, no doubt about it. What we did at Hatch was we took our technology that matches people to jobs based not on their grades. You could tell I've had not a great relationship with grades in my background, so maybe that influences it, but not based on their grades or their education background, but more on their skills, competencies, passions, motivators, who they are as a person, and matches them to relevant jobs. What we did was we took that tech and we applied it to stood down workers of all ages. So a Qantas pilot, a Virgin cabin crew member, a manager of a Marriott hotel, who all of a sudden needed a different type of work, and we were able to redeploy them immediately into other parts of the economy that needed more labour, like government call centres or Woolworths, were skyrocketing, or telcos. Everyone was working online at home, and there was a lot of work around that. So that's what we did from a business perspective. In terms of thinking about the labour market long term, what we learned through last year and coming into this year, talking to a lot of employers, is actually how important young talent's going to be for organisations to reinvent themselves and thrive in the digital economy. Because if you step back and just look at what's happened to the world over the past year, we were already on a transformation arc towards a digital economy out of the industrial era. We're sort of still somewhere between the two. We're moving towards the digital era. COVID's accelerated that. It's probably made 10 years of changes within 12 months. And for organisations, what that means is they now need to think differently about how they bring products to market, what their consumers expect, how they organise their teams, how they structure their services. And actually engaging in more young talent brings in fresh perspectives, new thinking, a lot of digital natives into that reinvention process. And so our view, over the next coming years, is going to be so critical for an organisation to engage the next generation in their broader workforce. And that's going to be our focus, is making it really easy for them to do so, making it easy to connect the right young person into an organisation where they can have an outsized impact.
Awesome. Okay. Matt?
Look, I think what's happened is, just following from what Adam was saying, there's kind of been a fundamental ideological shift in what work actually is, and it's moved to, I guess, more of a task-based approach distributed remotely. So whether that comes back into the fore in physical premises over time, it will in some ways, but it'll be completely different. And I think that definitely engages a much younger type of worker entering the economy. I think, the studies say it's in the first 10 years of your career, your earnings and your career kind of dictates the rest. I think that's fundamentally different, and the skill sets have all changed and warped throughout this whole period. So I think there's actually, this could be the opportunity of your lifetime, right? If you're a digital native, you've got a great university degree, and you've got, functional technical skills walking into this employment environment of the future, this is actually something you want to seize on. And, I look at even what's happened in tech, Zip, we're looking to grow our headcount by 90% in the next 2 years. We went remote, some of the office still is remote, but it's a very young workforce, it's a dynamic place to work. And what's happened is, you're seeing this with other Australian companies that have, emerged. Canva has several hundred positions in a graduate program. There's all of these employers that you might have not have entered, this university looking at working for, but what's happened while you've been in it, the skills have changed, the world's changed, and you're walking into this whole new world. It should actually be exciting, and it's not all doom and gloom.
Yep. Katerina?
Look, I couldn't agree more with both of you. I might just add sort of a lens of sort of climate and sustainability on top of that, and just more sort of global demographic shifts, which I think is really exciting. Not only has COVID completely changed sort of our day-to-day relationship with work, but you know, in this period we have seen amazing uptake of tech and clean tech. And more sort of global agreements and progress on climate probably in the last year than we have in the last decade. So kind of, you know, when it wasn't front and center because of COVID, we've had huge amounts of progress, which has opened up just a plethora of opportunity. And it couldn't be sort of more pertinently timed because, you know, in my analysis, we need to be launching about 100,000 sort of climate-focused businesses every year if we're going to solve this globally. So say 5 to 10,000 in Australia every year. So we need every bit of talent we can get, particularly tech talent in the climate space. But I think what is kind of really exciting for graduates at the moment is that global demographics have shifted. So if you have a look by 2028, so sort of 2 terms potentially of Biden-Harris, the global demographics in the US, and even earlier, I think it's 26 in Asia, will be predominantly younger social demographic with like a more social liberal outcome compared to the sort of more conservative older voter base we have. And this affects both politics but also business. It basically is showing that over these sort of next 5 to 10 years, we already are having a shift, but that shift will be sustained, both in terms of our technology adoption in businesses, but also the progressive nature of our society. So choosing a career that sort of satisfies what young people generally are having a preference for is a really safe bet right now, because we're just at the start of this amazing wave. So I think that relates both to skills development but also passion development, because we have this long stretch of, you know, I think incredible, you know, flourishing in lots of different areas of passion in society and politics and business. That's just kicking off now. So like it couldn't be a better time. And we have a bit of a crisis that pushes people to make these decisions and new styles of work. So it's kind of great.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a bit more on that, because we've obviously talked about COVID. We've talked about, you know, we've just been through our first recession in quite a while. What are some of the other, say, mega trends? You touched on US politics, you touched on more socially minded generations coming forward. I'll ask each of you this. What are some of the other mega trends out there in the world that you think are influencing our new grads coming out there into the workforce? What do they need to be mindful of? Or, Matt, to your point, what presents opportunity, I guess? Kick off.
Yeah, I mean, I'd present 2 that would come to mind straight away. The first that I think both the guys touched on is just the rapid rate of skills change that's going on. So like in the 1980s, the half-life of a typical professional skill was around about 30 to 35 years. So, you know, you learn accounting basics and it'll be about the same 30 years from now. Today, the half-life of a professional skill is around about 4 to 5 years and falling. You know, the kind of tools and technology languages and frameworks and approaches you use are going to be actually changing and recycling quite quickly. So I think, you know, as a young person, there's an opportunity there, because it means that you're not coming up against 30 years of someone doing the one thing that you're now competing against. Actually, everyone's on a bit more of a level playing field. And it also means that you're encouraged to invest in your own development and continue to learn, you know, even as you move past university. So I think that's important to be aware of and probably take confidence from too as you move into the workforce. The second I would point out, which is maybe a little more ethical, is there is a fast growing amount of focus around some of the downsides of the technology era, particularly around this idea of an attention economy. So much of our attention is drawn towards spending time on social media. You know, whether it be Facebook or TikTok. I've got a friend who spends 8 hours a day on TikTok. I have no idea. I mean, TikTok's cool, right? But I don't know what you're doing 8 hours a day. And if you look behind the scenes of the machinery of these technology companies, you know, they will admit that a lot of the incentives that are driving the teams building the products is just to keep your attention as long as possible to solve ad products. And I think that some of that thinking is now becoming challenged and unraveled, and there's a desire to do better, to like build products for society that do better than just like give you a hit of dopamine and try and hold on to your attention as long as possible.
Great point,
And I'd say that businesses are looking to the next generation to help them to figure out, how do we do that? Like how do we play a more sustainable role in someone's day that is not detrimental on their mental health, but is actually supportive, but is still commercial for us?
Cool. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, it's worth pointing out that we're almost only not even halfway through this thing, right? Like, you know, we've gone into this complete sociological, ideological shift in work, in life. You know, 10 years happening in a year almost, and people adjusting to that. And then what's going to come out of that, we don't quite know. But you're at this amazing inflection point where you can figure out societally what's important. You know, what you've, I guess, experienced in tech, and you know, we don't know what the year is going to look like. There's talk of unbundling large tech companies in the US. You know, there's still, you know, there's so many things going on, but if you can actually just take this point in time and figure out where you're at, what you can learn, and you know, as Adam said, those tech skills that have just become, you know, so much more prevalent. We were arguably probably 5 years behind in Australia anyway, and this has caught us up to speed. And you know, if you can consciously, I guess, develop and understand what those are and learn those skills now, you're going to end up in the other side of this, in the remaining, you know, 30-50% of it, in a really different, interesting place for your future.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously there are some key mega trends, I think, you know, around tech and around sustainability and around sort of social progressive movements. But I'm going to take that back a little bit, you know, and take it to a bit more of a personal level. And to your point, Adam, you know, I remember seeing a stat when COVID started, the average American spent 40 hours a week watching television, which for me, I was like, wow, that's a full-time workload of television. That's a lot of time. You know, and we probably, you know, that a lot of that is transitioning to social media watching mode. But, you know, I think we all have, you know, a bit of a choice how we want to spend this next unusual year, where we want to put our attention. Is it going to be social media? Is it going to be, you know, TV? What's it going to be? And spending a lot of time, and it's really interesting to hear about Hatch and how so much of your profiling is around personalities. Like, that's one thing I wish I had done a whole lot more of, and still to this day want to invest more in, is actually figuring out, you know, everyone is, you know, smart in lots of different spectrums, but figuring out, you know, not just always doing the things that you know you can do, but doing the things that you know you can do and you really love doing. I think so much of us spend our time in that wrong quadrant instead of the bits that make you flourish and that you're good at. So if you can spend a bit of this year, you know, doing a bit of personal investigation, because it will just save, you know, years of your career where you're trying to fit yourself into the wrong box of, you know, executing something that you can do but you don't love doing, or you're good at but you're not as good at in another area. So that would sort of be my one reflection, if it can be a mega trend of like a bit of, and then probably seeking out how to actualize that outside of the workplace, because I think, you know, our workplaces were set up, I didn't even realize, for extroverts. Now they're being reformed for, you know, people who like spending more time by themselves. So if you are, you know, figuring out how to create this sort of pastiche of a life where you're getting enough or, you know, not enough of, you know, different things, be it social interaction, be it sport, other things, is going to be interesting and a juggle for everyone, and you've got to kind of do a bit of self-investigation to figure that out. I certainly am.
Yeah. That's really good, and also to being mindful of that mental health as well, and how that's impacting you and those around you. How have you guys seen that in your workplaces? How have you guys seen, not only for your own selves, but also too for your own workforce? How has that played a role in decision making, etc.?
Yeah, I can talk to our experience. Last year we pivoted Hatch's business model to redeploy stood down workers, what I was mentioning earlier, stood down workers to new jobs. And we did that within 7 days. And that was a lot of tech work within 7 days, and we were fully remote as a business for the first time. We've got about 20 people, so everyone was fully remote. And it took off like a rocket. And so all of a sudden, over the coming 2 or 3 months after that, we were redeploying thousands of people into new jobs. We'd never done that before. We were figuring it out as we went. And everyone was working their butts off to just make it happen. Yep. And because everyone was remote, I as a leader couldn't see how much they were working. Sure. It just wasn't visible. And so people were just not taking lunch. They were working all the way through till late in the night. They were not sleeping well. And several of the team got really close to burnout, and one did get to burnout. And I think I learned a real lesson from that as we reflected on it at the end of the arc of that work. And we were about to sort of restructure how we come back to the office again, which was how do you be more explicit and proactive around healthy boundaries? And we didn't have a language about it. Like, we didn't talk about what are some healthy boundaries. You know, if work gets hard and fast, like how do you put the right boundaries in place to maintain balance? So we tried to design that into, when we came back to the office, how we designed just the week. So, you know, now what we're doing is about 50% of the time in the office, 50% of the time at work. We're using our calendars a lot better so that people know when you're offline. We've set better expectations about, you know, when you need to be responsive, when you don't need to be responsive. But I think the big takeaway for me was just remote work, like, gives you less visibility and means you've got to be more proactive and like look in yourself to areas that might give you signals as to how everyone's doing and put some of those rules in place.
Yeah, cool. I just one last question to ask before we wrap up. You touched on it before, Katerina, around chasing down opportunities, chasing down or pursuing the likes on LinkedIn, et cetera, to involve yourself around certain organisations or people, et cetera, to really put yourselves out there. I just want to ask each of you very, very quickly, what attributes would you be looking for in a candidate, and what advice would you have for a candidate in today's environment?
I would say probably an active personal interest in the problem that we're trying to solve, what the company's core mission is, and some alignment with, you know, your passion or purpose on that page. I think, you know, you can have great technical skill sets, you know, you can have the qualifications, but I think what's really fundamental for us is that connection, that interest, and that active interest, and I guess a little bit of fire behind the eyes that you can see, because, you know, you need some hustle, and, you know, I guess having hired all types of people in different functions and from different environments and backgrounds. I've hired people out of, you know, corporates that on paper looked great, in person that wasn't really what they thought it would be or that was the right fit. I've hired outliers who've been rough around the edges with a bit of, you know, fire in their belly, and, you know, they've just been absolutely fantastic, and you can mentor and skill those people up. So I think, you know, hire character, train skill, but there's got to be some passion there as well on top of that.
Awesome. Katerina?
Yeah, I would second that. My kind of experience is that, you know, I would agree, if you can train someone, but they are, you know, showing up and they're there already, it's such a good skill. And to my kind of earlier point, that we need pretty much in every area of interest or industry, you need every skill set these days, more than ever. So, you know, don't feel like you have to align your degree or what you've studied with the area that you necessarily go into at all. You know, I do think like attracts like, but I've always, particularly if you're a new graduate, I've always loved seeing CVs that has like the long list of KFC and like all the other random stuff that they've done, because it just, to me, it shows that, you know, they've tried lots of things, they've probably failed, they've met lots of people, you know, they're humble enough to have done it all. So don't be ashamed of all of those kind of bizarre things that you might have done. I think it all adds to the picture.
Yeah, cool. Adam?
I would say in terms of finding the right starting point, my advice would be to look for environments you're going to feel alive in. Like, look for places that you genuinely want to work at, and that's going to get you a long way as a starting point. And when you're making an application, talk to the reason why. Like, talk authentically to why. Maybe it is about like a background that's a little less conventional that's led you there. Whatever the reason is, like, just be honest and real and be yourself about it. But then what I would say is, once you get started in a job, I think this maybe is a little bit contrary to what we've been talking about. I think the most important thing you can do in your first job is be a safe pair of hands. Like, more than anything, it's actually probably less about the passion and more just about reliability. If you can be really reliable in your first job, I guarantee your career progression will move faster than anyone else. Because that's kind of what you need when you're managing a young team, is for them to be like trustworthy and like be there for you and do a good job beyond your expectations, and then you'll just give them more and more opportunity from there.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, people are paying you to learn. Your first job is really as much about learning and finding fit as it is about the skills at hand.
Yeah. Awesome. Guys, thank you very much. Thank you. That was fantastic. So that's the first one of our panel discussions on unconventional careers. I think the key themes that stood out for me was, one, that it is okay to take a different road. that you do have the support network around you, that you do have the ability to take twisting, turning, to have the laundry list of different jobs. And that shows that you've done the time, you've done the hard yards, if you will, but also too, to follow the passion. I think that's a really cool takeaway, that you have that ability, that what empowers you, that you'll find enjoyment, and you will get there. So thank you guys, appreciate it. Thank you.